Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Iran has extended a monitoring deal with the International Atomic Energy Agency for a month. In a briefing, IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi said the new agreement will run through June. India has become the third country to record more than 300,000 deaths from COVID-19. The country's caseload is well in excess of 26 million, second only to the US. In Pakistan, the virus has claimed 57 lives and infected more than 3,000 people in the past 24 hours. Globally, there are nearly 3.5 million fatalities and more than 166 million cases. Myanmar security forces have killed 4 more people after opening fire at a church in Kaya State. Local media says the victims were taking shelter in the church. The Karenni People's Defense Force says its fighters torched the houses of military collaborators and government offices in the state. Anti-coup protests continue despite the killing of 819 people in the military's crackdown on dissent. In India, authorities have begun evacuating thousands of people from the country's east coast as it braces for yet another cyclone. Yas, the second storm to hit India in a week, is set to turn into a severe cyclone with wind speeds of up to 177 kilometers per hour. According to Met Department, the storm is likely to make landfall on Wednesday near the border between Odisha and West Bengal states. And in football, Spain's captain Sergio Ramos has been left out of the squad for this summer's Euro 2020 by coach Luis Enrique. Ramos has been struggling with injury and has only played 1 game since the end of March. His absence means there are no players from Real Madrid for this summer's delayed tournament. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Iran has temporarily extended its nuclear monitoring deal with the International Atomic Energy Agency for a month. In a briefing, IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi said Tehran has agreed to extend the monitoring of its nuclear installations till the end of June. The 3-month monitoring deal between Tehran and the UN nuclear watchdog expired on Sunday. Russia has welcomed the step, saying it will help maintain an efficient atmosphere at the Vienna talks on revival of Iran nuclear deal. Moscow's permanent representative to the IAEA, Mikhail Ulyanov, said the step will facilitate the diplomatic efforts to restore the JCPOA. Myanmar security forces have killed 4 more people after opening fire at a church in Kaya State. Local media says the victims were taking shelter in the church. The Karenni People's Defense Force says its fighters torched the houses of military collaborators and government offices in the state. It comes a day after 40 soldiers were reportedly killed during clashes with resistance fighters in Kaya. Meanwhile, a resistance fighter was killed and 5 others were hurt in Mumbai town. Anti-coup protests continue despite the killing of 819 people in the military's crackdown on dissent. In India, authorities have begun evacuating thousands of people from the country's east coast as it braces for yet another cyclone. Yas, the second storm to hit India in a week, is set to turn into a severe cyclone with wind speeds of up to 177 kilometers per hour. According to the Met Department, the storm is likely to make a landfall on Wednesday near the border between Odisha and West Bengal states. Last week, Cyclone Tokte hit India's west coast, killing more than 150 people and leaving a trail of destruction. India has become the third country to record more than 300,000 deaths from COVID-19. The country's caseload is well over 26 million, second only to the US.
The new coronavirus is ravaging India and parts of Latin America as vaccine supplies, management, and distribution continue to pose challenges. Nearly 4,500 more people lost their lives in India and 222,000 tested positive overnight. Over in Latin America, Brazil registered 860 fatalities and almost 36,000 new cases, with the tally crossing 16 million. But in some good news, Mexico registered 50 new deaths, the lowest daily increase in over a year. Meanwhile, a new study shows dogs can detect COVID-positive arrivals and could soon be used at airports. And Bahrain will suspend the entry of travelers from countries on its red list from May 24th. It mostly includes South Asian countries where the Indian variant has been detected. Globally, there are nearly 3.5 million fatalities and more than 166 million cases.
Pakistan has lost 57 lives to coronavirus in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the virus has infected another 3,000 people overnight. Nationwide, the virus has claimed over 20,300 lives. More than 903,000 people have been infected so far. Officials say 820,000 people have recovered, while there are nearly 63,000 active cases and more than 4,700 critical ones. Meanwhile, Pakistan has purchased another 2 million doses of the Chinese Sinovac vaccine. With the arrival of this consignment, a total of 11 million vaccines have been received. In Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the body of another young man, Huzab Ahmed, has been found in the Kewa Kazigand area of Kulgam district. Dead bodies of civilians are found almost daily across the occupied valley. This comes as occupying troops continue cordon and search operations. Meanwhile, the All-Party Hurriyat Conference has urged United Nations to take action against war crimes by the Indian forces. In a statement, Hurriyat also lauded Pakistan for exposing Indian brutalities on international forums. Israel has launched a wave of mass arrests against its Palestinian citizens as part of a violent crackdown on recent protests. Thousands of security forces started a large-scale operation to arrest over 500 Palestinian citizens of Israel. The citizens say the operation aims to crush their resistance to Israel's apartheid and settler mob violence. Earlier in occupied territories, Israeli troops raided Jerusalem once again, arresting dozens of Palestinians. The UN has called for urgent talks to start a meaningful political process and end Israeli aggression in Palestine. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to visit the Middle East to meet with Israeli and Palestinian officials. This comes as the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas appear to hold for the fourth straight day. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, at least 15 people have died as Mount Nyiragongo erupted and torrents of lava poured into villages after dark. It buried hundreds of houses before halting just short of the city of Goma. A government spokesperson says 17 villages were hit and 3 health centers, a primary school and a water pipeline were also destroyed. According to UNICEF, over 170 children are feared to be missing and 150 others separated from their families. Meanwhile, the International Federation of Red Cross says between 3,000 and 5,000 people fled to Rwanda. The eruption was caused when fractures opened in the volcano's side, causing lava flows in various directions. Afghan forces claim to have killed 50 Taliban fighters in the eastern Laghman province. The ministry says 60 others were wounded during operations in Ali Nagar and the outskirts of Mithlaram. Meanwhile, the fighters say they have conquered checkposts in the province and killed many soldiers. Earlier, the ministry claimed to have freed 8 soldiers from a Taliban prison in the northern Baghlan province. The Taliban have not commented on the incident so far. Russia has accused the U.S. of violating the New START arms control treaty by surpassing the limits imposed by the accord. The foreign ministry says the number of U.S. nuclear launchers and bombers was above the set limit. Last year, the New START treaty was extended bilaterally by the U.S. and Russia. It limits the number of strategic nuclear warheads, missiles and bombers that Moscow and Washington can deploy. The treaty was originally signed in 2010 between both states in a bid to further reduce strategic offensive arms. The United States has imposed visa restrictions on Eritrean and Ethiopian officials that were involved in the Tigray crisis. In a statement, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said they took no meaningful steps to end the hostilities. He said the sanctions target current or former Ethiopian or Eritrean officials and members of the security forces. They also include the Amhara Regional and Irregular Forces and members of the Tigray People's Liberation Front. He condemned the killings, forced removals, systemic sexual violence, and other human rights violations. Blinken said the U.S. is also imposing curbs on economic and security assistance to Ethiopia. But he said humanitarian aid in areas such as health, food, and education will continue. Ireland's Foreign Minister Simon Coveney has accused Belarus of aviation piracy for diverting a Ryanair flight to Minsk. Minsk arrested a dissident journalist on board after intercepting the plane over a false bomb alert. Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary has also called the forced landing state-sponsored piracy. He said there were Secret Service agents on the plane as well. The UK has termed the incident an act of war and called for sanctions on Belarus, but Minsk says its air traffic controllers issued recommendations to the crew and did not force it to land. The Foreign Ministry says Belarus is ready to let experts visit the area and see all data. Meanwhile, Latvian airline Air Baltic says it will no longer use Belarus airspace for its flights. In the U.S., civil rights activists rallied in Minneapolis on the first anniversary of George Floyd's death. Derek Chauvin, a former Minneapolis policeman, was found guilty of murdering him. Protesters, including Floyd's family, called for police reform at the event called 1 Year, What's Changed? Many people in the crowd carried signs with pictures of Floyd and other black people killed by police. Reverend Al Sharpton called for a just sentence for Chauvin, who is scheduled to be sentenced on June the 25th. Last month, a jury found him guilty of second and third degree murder and manslaughter. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In China, a rare and giant panda is set to make its debut at a breeding base in Shaanxi province. The 12-year-old male is now the world's only captive brown panda. The brown and white animal was found in the Foping Nature Reserve in 2009. Qi Shi was admitted to the Qingling Research Center in 2014. Located at the northern foot of the Qingling mountain range, the center is China's third giant panda research hub. It features dense vegetation, offering a highly suitable environment for pandas. And in Italy, the snowy slopes are busy as skiing resorts have finally opened after more than a year's closure. Details in this report.
These skiers on the slopes of Passo del Tonale are very happy as they are finally able to glide in the snow. The country's ski resorts had been closed since the outbreak of coronavirus in February 2020. The government promised several reopening schedules, but they were later cancelled at the last minute. 6 resorts were initially expected to reopen in February, but the all-amateur skiing was once again shut down until March.
It's okay. We are outside. If the situation next year is similar, it will be necessary to think of solutions for the gatherings on the cable cars. But with a little education from everyone, I think we can do it.
Though there is not much time left for the skiing season as the temperatures rise, still many enthusiasts are overjoyed to be back on their skis.
It is a strange feeling because we are now in the warm season. We are in spring, but we go to the slopes. At night it snows and in the morning there are perfect weather conditions. I must say that I'm very happy to be able to ski these days.
The country has been relaxing the coronavirus restrictions slowly, with indoor dining expected to restart in mid-June.
And now the business updates. European stocks are trading mixed at the start of the week. Investors continue to focus on inflation concerns and the Bitcoin sell-off. Frankfurt's DAX is leading the gains, adding nearly 0.5%. London's FTSE has edged up marginally. The CAC 40 in Paris is hovering above the flat line. Italy's FTSE MIB and the Pan-European Stock 600 have dipped. Earlier Asian markets were somewhat muted, with Hong Kong's Hang Seng and Seoul's Kospi dipping. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.